Fiat Ministry Network and Patchwork Heart Ministry present Journeys in Faith. Now, here's Andy Santis.
Hi, good evening. Welcome to Journeys in Faith here on Fiat Ministry Network. My name is Ann DeSantis. It's so great to be here, as always. And I have an amazing guest for you this evening. He's a very good friend of Fiat Ministry Network. His name is Tony Agnesi. He's a Catholic author, blogger, broadcaster, podcaster, and he has so much to talk to us about this evening. So welcome, Tony. Thanks for joining us on Journeys in Faith.
And it's great, always great seeing you, and always great being with you, especially here on the Fiat Ministry Network and Patchwork Heart Ministries, two of my favorite evangelical ministries.
I know they are because you've also been working closely with them, and now you're on Fiat Ministry Network with your own show. So we have so much to talk about. So for those people who have never met you before, Tony, I'd love for them to have an introduction to you and to your life. So please do share with us your faith journey.
Oh, I'd be happy to. You know, I was born and raised Catholic. I'm a cradle Catholic. My mom was a devout Catholic, and I mean, she was at the church every day, polishing the brass on the candlesticks and ironing all of the vestments and things for the priest. Our church was a very, very small church. I was an altar boy till I was 22 years old, because there were no other younger kids to replace me. I had to wait for somebody to come up to the 4th or 5th grade so they could take it over. My dad was an Italian Methodist, which kind of seems like an impossibility, but he was Methodist and Italian. And there was a small Italian Methodist church in where we lived, and he attended there. So I have a little bit of that Methodist kind of background from my dad. As a matter of fact, a couple of my favorite books that I possess are two Methodist hymnals. One was my grandfather's and one was my dad's, and I got both of those from them. And from each of my parents, I learned a little something differently. You know, I learned my faith from my mom. I always thank her for making me go to church and making me go to confession. Saturday morning was always time to go to confession. And I remember all my little buddies would come over to, hey, can Tony come out and play? And she's not until he's gone to confession. I tried to warn her that our playing was probably going to require me needing to go to confession, but we always had to go first. And I learned things like faithfulness from my dad. When my mom and dad got married back in the 40s, that was considered a mixed marriage, when a Protestant married a Catholic. And my dad agreed to raise us as Catholics. And he took that very, very seriously. Every Sunday morning, we would get up and he would drive my mom and my sister and I to a mass at our little church. And then while we were at Mass, he would drive across town to St. Dominic's and pick up two Dominican sisters who he would bring back to our parish, and they would teach our CCD, our Sunday school class, after Mass. And then when that was over, he would take my sister and I and the sisters back to St. Dom's. My sister and I would go back home, and then he would go to church later that morning at his Methodist church. And that sounds like a pretty big day on Sunday. And he did that every Sunday for about 15 years. And he got to be very good friends with the Dominican sisters. And I remember one particular time my dad was in the hospital and they didn't think he was going to make it through the night. And I remember going to the chapel to pray, and when I found that everything was going to be okay with him, I also discovered that those Dominican sisters, who he was kind of their driver, if you will, had prayed an all-night vigil for him that night. So I have a wonderful parental upbringing, and like most kids, I kind of strayed from the faith when I went off, between college and my time in the Army. I did spend a lot of time at St. Mattress of the Springs, which is that Saturday morning where you just can't, or Sunday morning where you just can't quite get out of bed. But I've always been very very much involved in my faith. It really strengthened when I made a Cursillo back in the 1970s. The Cursillo movement actually, which came out of Vatican II, and a lot of men at that time, especially in Europe and in Spain, where it came from, were not going to Mass. It was kind of, you go to church and you see about 90% women. It's not all that different now, by the way. There are fewer men always at Mass than there are women, but and so I made a Cursillo, and that Cursillo kind of got me reignited, if you will, in my faith. My wife made her Cursillo in a different city. I made mine here in Ohio. She made hers in Atlanta, Georgia, and it was the first women's Cursillo in Atlanta, Georgia, that she made. And we were involved with, Marriage Encounter and Christ Renews His Parish and those types of things throughout our lifetime as well. So that's kind of my upbringing. And business-wise, I've been in the broadcast industry for 54 years. Since I was 16 years old, it's all I've ever done. And I've done on-air work till I was probably in my late 30s, and I've been a radio executive since then, and still am. I haven't retired yet. I'm enjoying myself too much, and it's always been fun. But I have managed radio and TV stations by being a storyteller. Everyone says you're a great storyteller, and you need to write some of these stories down. They would keep telling me, write them down. You need to write stories down. And I wasn't much of a writer. I think I shared with you once before, and when I went to college, my first paper I did in English class came back with more red ink than black ink and a great big F at the top.
Oh, boy.
And a note from the professor that said, you'll never write above a 5th grade level. And that kind of squelched my writing until about 2012, I decided that I would write down some of these stories. And I began writing, and I wrote about a half a dozen stories, and I gave them to a woman who was a former college professor who I see at daily Mass. And I asked her if she'd read them for me, and she said, sure. And she read them. And when she was finished, I said, what'd you think? And she said, oh, Tony, they're marvelous stories. And I said, well, that's really not important. What level do I write at? And she said, about 6th grade. So I'm up a grade.
I do remember this.
I'm up a grade from college. So I've been writing, I've been writing ever since. I've written 3 books. And they're all in a series called The Storytellers. And the first is called A Storyteller's Guide to a Grace-Filled Life. I don't know if I can do it without getting some shadow on it. And wouldn't we all love to have a grace-filled life? Mary was full of grace and Jesus was full of grace. We read that in the Bible. And wouldn't we love to have a grace-filled life? And the secret is we can. God's grace is so abundant, and it's just infinite amount of grace. All we have to do is ask for it and bring it to us, and by being faithful to Him. And then my third book, which I'll mention second, was volume 2 of the first book, Storyteller's Guide to a Grace-Filled Life, volume 2. It actually started out as a book called The Lost Stories, because I had lost a bunch of stories. Didn't know what happened to them. And I found them a couple of years ago on a hard drive, and they were intact, and we decided we were going to try to put them into a second book. And it became, The Lost Stories kind of lost its glitter, and we just made it volume 2 of the first story. And, interesting, I just received, I wanted to share this with you, Ann, because I know you'd appreciate it. I do jail ministry, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get going here. But I sent some books off to a young man who's in prison, and I got a letter from him, and I'm going to read just a little part of this letter.
Please do.
He said, my family followed a well-known televangelist, and I knew him personally. The very last conversation I had with him, he was telling me that God was just about done with me. I've since learned how untrue that is, but I'd be lying if I said it doesn't still come to mind and affect me. This is where your book, A Storyteller's Guide to a Grace-Filled Life, Volume 2, comes into play. On page 50 and 51, you said, God will never give up on us. In His compassion and patience, He will wait for us and bless our searching. And he said, oh, how true that statement is, and it has set my mind free. It's wonderful to realize that God that Jesus died for my sins. Glory be to God. And he goes on in the letter. And, it's interesting because we began to correspond a little bit. And just this past week, I got a letter from him, and included was the first chapter of his book. So
Oh,
he's an aspiring writer, and I just sent him a letter over the weekend encouraging him to continue to write. So every now and then we get a glimpse. The Lord gives us a glimpse of what we do, whether it be hosting a show as you do or I do, or whether it be writing a book or whatever, writing an article for a magazine, that they touch people, and we don't get that immediate feedback. So it's really nice from time to time that the Lord gives us a glimpse of what happens when we serve him. My third book, or my second book, which we'll talk about third, is about serving others. It's a storyteller's guide to joyful service. And interestingly enough, when my book came out, Father Leo, the chef on EWTN that prepares meals, well, he was preparing a meal and doing a talk, and I was sitting with Dr. Ray Guarendi from EWTN, who does a show called The Doctor Is In. And so Ray says, "Hey, Tony, how's that second book doing?" And I go, "Well, not as good as the first." And he said, "Well, I can tell you why." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Because it's about serving others. And no one wants to serve others. Everyone wants to be served." You go to the bookstore and you'll find all of these books on self-improvement and self-help and all about self. You'll find very few books in that same section about serving others. But joy comes from serving others. It's just that simple. And a lot of people have a very, very difficult time, Ann, separating happiness from joy. We're happy several times a day. We're unhappy several times a day. The Cleveland Indians are playing the Yankees. I mean, we lost like 12-2 last night. So in the playoffs. So I was unhappy. And then I was really unhappy with the first debate that the presidential candidates did. But we're happy and sad all day. Joy is something different. Joy comes to us from our Lord. Joy comes to us from God. And I know people on their deathbeds who are joyful, who have joyful lives that they have done that, and it comes from serving others. So the book is about getting joy from serving others, and a lot of the stories in that book are about service, about how we can serve others, and as we do that, joy comes to us.
Amen. Thank you so much so far for sharing your wonderful story. And, I have my books right in front of me here, all three. I have to show my audience here that I am a fan of Tony Agnesi and had met him a long time ago on social media first, and then in person got to see him at the Catholic Media Conference, which was...
Yes, it was great. It was a few years back. This year's conference got canceled. I was actually looking forward to attending. So hopefully next year, maybe we'll have a Catholic media conference.
Yes, that would be awesome. But yes, these books are very enriching, and you are a storyteller. And that's what I like so much about your style, is that you can touch people's hearts. I know that you've touched mine. So I thank you for enriching my own life and my faith.
Well, I'd love to tell a few stories here during the show. Can I give? I'm gonna ask if you wouldn't mind me doing a book plug, because, and I'll tell you why. All of the talks that I had scheduled, I'm a Catholic speaker and I'm out quite a bit. But once the pandemic hit, everything got canceled. So I had 8 talks scheduled, and we had ordered books for those 8 talks. And of course, all the books are sitting over here in the other part of my office. And so what I thought we could do is to offer them at a very special price. So what we're going to do is, if it's okay with you, you can get all 3 books in a bundle. And the 2 first and second book are $13 each, and the new one is $10. So that's $36 worth of books. Normally, I would sell them for $30, but if you use the promo code FRIENDS and the coupon code FRIENDS, $20, you'll get all 3 books. It's the best price I've ever offered anywhere. And I'll tell you what, I'll sign them and ship them for free, just to kind of move some of the stacks and stacks of books that we have here until we get back out on the speaker circuit, hopefully this fall, but more than likely next spring. So use a promo code FRIENDS. You can get all three of those books signed for $20. And a reminder, and I know you know this, Ann, I make no profit from my book sales. I take no money from the sale of books. All of the money that I receive from the sale of the books, once we pay the expenses, paid for printing and all of the postage and all of those necessary things, everything else goes to the charities that my wife and I, and ministries that my wife and I support, many of which that we talk about in the book. So it's a way for us to be able to donate, more money than we normally would by having the monies from the books go to that. And my speaking fees as well all go to the charities that we support.
That's really an incredible, and I'll put it in quotes, deal, because it's more than a deal. It's really enriching your faith, your Catholic faith. So I would encourage people to do that. And you know what? We're coming into the holiday season, right? Advent, Christmas. I do think it's a very good gift.
Yeah, it might be a
Really
great gift.
is.
And the format of the books is there are individual stories. So there are a number of stories in each book. You can read them in about 5 minutes. I had one guy tell me, Tony, that's a great bathroom book. I don't know what he meant by that, but he reads one time per, and you get through the book in a couple of months. But it's and a lot of people will use it on their nightstand. They'll read one story in the morning or in the evening, or a couple of stories during the course of the week. I have a lot of men's groups and women's group that use it kind of as a discussion starter. They'll read one of the stories. So each story has some scripture attached to it that references it. And then at the end of each story, I ask three questions for reflection. So there's some reflection questions. So a lot of groups will read a story, and then they'll spend some time reflecting on the story. One of those men's groups invited me, and I was able to get free to attend their men's group one night, and was able to sit with them as we went through the stories. And as they read a story and began reflecting on them, some of the stories they told, Anne, were just amazing, just fabulous stories, much better than mine, as a matter of fact. And a lot of those stories are about miracles that have happened in their lives and things that have happened. And so it prompted me. And when I speak a lot, people will come up to me afterwards when I'm signing books and will tell me these great, wonderful miracle stories. And so I have a new book that I'm working on called Tony, Let Me Share My Miracle. And it's miracle stories from other people who, for whatever reason, would never write them down. And this is an opportunity for them to share them with me, and I'll write them, and they can yes or no approve them and so forth. And they'll be able to share them with their kids or grandkids down the road, and they'll all end up in a book that we hope to release August of 2021. So that's our book for next year.
Oh, that's going to be great. I'll look forward to that one. And again, the title of that one again, Tony, if you would.
Tony, Let Me Share My Miracle is the name of the book.
Yeah.
So we're working on miracle stories. Miracles are something that people always talk to me about when I speak. They come up to me afterwards and they say, Tony, how do you have so many miracles and things happen in your life? And I always tell them during the course of my talks that you can have a life of predictable miracles. And the way you have a life of predictable miracles is through service. And I have this little trigger prayer. I know I've shared it with you, Ann, but we'll share it with our viewers here tonight. It's a little prayer is, Lord, make me an instrument, put somebody in my path today that you can help through me. So put somebody in my path today that you can help through me. I'll be your hands, your eyes, your ears, Lord. I'll be mobilized to help, but you have to put that in front of me. And I always say it's a prayer that if you pray it, it'll work every day. It works every day. It happens all the time. There are always somebody who crosses your path that could use a smile, that could use a kind word, that could use some encouragement if they're having a tough time. And so that's all I've done over the course of a number of years. I put up my antenna oftentimes at daily mass. When I receive the Eucharist, I'll say, Lord, make me an instrument, put somebody in my path today that you can help through me. And sure enough, almost every single day, something happens. Now, we're not talking about parting the Red Sea kind of miracles here, Ann. We're talking about predictable, everyday miracles that happen in our lives. I talk about some of them. There you go to, I'm at the grocery store, and somebody that I knew from coaching a young man, a parent, was in the aisle, and you could tell he was probably under chemotherapy, had lost his hair, his weight had diminished, and I got this nudge, and this is what we have to do: is follow the nudges and bumps that we get from the Holy Spirit. And I'm not the only guy to get. We all get them, and it's just a matter of whether or not we act on them. So when I spotted him, the normal reaction that most people would have would be go down another aisle. But I went over and I talked to him a bit, and he said, "Tony, would you pray for me?" Now, when people ask me to pray for them, I have a little book that I keep by my on my bed nightstand by my bed, and I write their name in and what I'm praying for, and I usually do that in that way. And I told him I would do that, and he looked at me and he said, "Tony, would you pray for me now?" And right there in front of the frozen foods, I think we were between the peas and the green beans. I laid hands on him and he on me, and we prayed right there in the store. And from that moment on, I realized when somebody asks you to pray for them, they ask you to pray for them right now. And so that's what I do. I don't care where I'm at, in the frozen food aisle or at the Home Depot. It doesn't matter. When somebody asks for prayer, I pray for them then. But, this idea that of these bumps and nudges that we get from the Holy Spirit. And we have to have our antenna up. We have to be open to that. Most of us, have you ever gotten the nudge to call someone? Hey, I think I ought to call Bill, let's say. And,
yes.
And most of us just get that nudge and just ignore it and go on with our daily lives. But what happens when you call Bill is he says to you, "I was just thinking of you. You're the perfect person to talk to. I really needed someone to talk with." And you turn that nudge to call Bill into a miracle by simply picking up the phone and calling him. There was a gal I used to work with. She was a 3-time cancer survivor. And she did a thing called the 3 o'clock call. And every day at 3 o'clock, she'd drop whatever she was doing and call somebody. And you would be surprised the miraculous things that happened during her calls, how she was able to lift spirits and so forth. And I asked her at one time, I said, "Do you ever have difficulty coming up with people to call every day?" And she said, "Tony, no, there's always someone going into the hospital, somebody hurting, someone who's lost a loved one, someone who's having difficulty at school, there's always someone to call with a bit of encouragement." And it takes 5 minutes. Sometimes they turn into an hour, but we need to do that more frequently. When the pandemic hit back, we had just gotten back from Florida in March, and all of a sudden the pandemic hit. And I'm kind of stuck here in my office every day. I've been working out of my office now for 6 months, out of my home office. And so I decided I was going to call some people. And that's what I did. I just grabbed my old Rolodexes. I called some buddies from high school who I haven't talked to in years. I called a couple of college friends. I called some Catholic writers who are friends of mine who we don't get to talk very often. And since, the convention was canceled and so forth, you don't get to see people. And I organized a Zoom call of my high school graduating class. And it ended up, we had over 20 high school, of our high school classmates on. And
Nice.
We actually have done 2 or 3 of them since then. And I did one with the Catholic Writers Guild, and we got on some of the writers and so forth that I have befriended over the years through the guild. And it's just a miraculous thing, is just some of the wonderful conversations you can have with people just by following the nudges and bumps, and we get them in all sorts of ways. I remember one day I used to go to Mass quite a bit at 12:10 at a parish called St. Bernard's, which was near a college campus, Youngstown State University's college campus. And so I used to go there at 12:10. Well, I would leave my office at noon, and every light would turn green all the way down the town, and I would pull in the parking lot, and I would go to Mass there. This one day on the way back from Mass, I hadn't eaten yet, and I had enough time to stop and get something. So I pulled into an Arby's, and I walked in, and there was nobody in there at the time, but there were 2 young girls behind the counter, and I could tell that the one girl was kind of consoling her friend. They were both in tears as I walked in. And the one girl said that she was out of money and had no money, and payday wasn't coming up until Friday, and she had no means to get anything. And her friend said, I have $2 and I have a bus pass, and I will either give you the $2 and I'll keep the bus pass, or you can have the bus pass and I'll keep the $2. And when I overheard that, I got this nudge from the Holy Spirit. So I got my sandwich and my Coke, and I reached into my wallet and I gave each of them a $20 bill. And I said, this is your tip for good service. And now I could go to the ATM machine and get more money, but obviously this young woman couldn't. And I was just so impressed. It reminded me of the widow's mite, where, just a couple of coins is all she had, but she gave all that she had. And this young girl, I would put her at maybe 16 or 17 years old, was willing to give up her $2 or her bus pass. My giving up, $20 seemed to be rather small compared to what they had done. So these things happen all the time, and we have an opportunity to, I got a bump at the gym. I think I may have shared this with you, but not with your viewers. I'm at the gym working out, and I just had one of those. You never have the day you go to the gym and about the best thing you did was just get there. I was just kind of just going through the motions. And down at the other end of the gym was a woman who was just working out like crazy. I mean, she was just flying on a treadmill and doing squats. And I mean, I was just impressive. And she kind of motivated me. And so I started working a little harder because I had been kind of loafing my way through a workout that time. And I got this nudge to go thank her, just say, hey, you really gave me a motivation today watching you. But the problem was I never really had the opportunity. We're never on the same side of the gym at the same time. And then she left, I left, and so forth. But when I got to my car, as I unlocked my car door, there she was. She was standing there. She was parked next to me. And I kind of startled her. She kind of startled me. And I looked at her and I said, I wasn't in a very good mood to work out. I said, but just watching how hard you were going, you really motivated me to work harder. And she kind of got this strange look like, who is this weird guy? And she said, well, I'm glad I could help. It was something along those lines. And I said, you really did help me. And I'm sure you've helped many people in the past, too, who had problems being motivated. And I know for sure that you'll motivate more people in the future. And as I said that, her expression changed, and she got a tear in her eye. And she said, well, I'm glad I motivated you, because now you've given me the motivation to continue, and in continuing to be able to help others. And so, the subtitle of my book, my Serving Others book, is Turning Your Misery into Ministry. And that's what she's been able to do. And she didn't realize it until then. And now she realizes that she can turn that misery into a ministry. And, so many people can do that. And that the best drug counselors I've met in dealing with rehab centers and dealing with jails and prisons are recovering addicts. The best alcohol counselors I've ever met, through AA and other sources, are recovering alcoholics. They've been there, done that. They know. The woman that visits a cancer patient at the hospital is a recovering cancer patient, is a cancer survivor. The man giving a homeless man a pair of boots on the bridge was homeless once himself. The husband and wife that raise money for autism have an autistic child. And so the people that donate a whole meal at Christmas time to a needy family are paying it forward because somebody did that for them 30 years ago, and they're paying it forward. So turning your misery into ministry is something that the Lord can do for us if we're open to his grace and we're open to serving others. And the most wonderful things can happen. The most predictable miracles can happen by us just saying yes to God and doing that.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. I always love to hear your stories. And I know that we could talk even longer than an hour and listening to your life and the people that you've met and your experiences. So I thank you so much. Now, we do have to take a break in just a couple minutes. Before we do, I just want to mention to my viewers about an opportunity which you may have seen before on this show. It's called the Discover Your Mission series. So just keep an eye on the commercial because there will be some information there. And the website is patreon.com/Patchwork Heart Ministry. So do check that out too. So we will be back in just a few minutes here on Journeys in Faith with my great guest, Tony Agnesi. Hi, my name is Ann DeSantis, and I'm the director for the St. Raymond Nonatus Foundation for Freedom, Family, and Faith. You can learn about us on our website at nonatus.org. I'm here to tell you today about two great podcasts that I hope that you will tune in. The first Tuesday of every month at 8 o'clock, we have a podcast specifically for Catholics affected by divorce. From 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern, go to Philly Nonatus on YouTube to subscribe. In addition, we also have a podcast the last Thursday of every month. That's also at 8 o'clock Eastern Time for 1 hour. And that one is for families in crisis. We have some really great guests coming up soon, so hope to see you then. Please also consider the fact that you can make spiritual direction appointments with us with our spiritual moderator. All you need to do is go to our website on the contact form and just reach out to us. We'd be happy to hear from you and look forward to setting up an appointment. So would love to connect with you. Please share this video and let people know that we're there for families affected by divorce and also families in crisis. Thank you.
Patchwork Heart Ministry and Fiat Ministry Network present the Discover Your Mission series.
When I was young, in the 1950s, I attended Catholic grammar school and I memorized the Baltimore Catechism. In fact, I think I got an A on all of my tests. I faithfully attended Mass each week, not because I wanted to, but because I was afraid if I didn't, I would suffer eternal damnation. I followed all the rules. I followed my Catholic faith faithfully. But it wasn't until I became a wife and a mother and I began to try and pass my faith on to my children that I realized that everything I knew about Jesus was memorized doctrine.
I can't even share with you how I was so rooted in my faith. And I was attending Mass, but I was not present. I was a good man, I was a good father, I was instilling the sacraments into my family. I was definitely not intentional. I was stuck rooted in my faith.
But what kind of strength did he have? Jackie did not just have a strength of body or baseball skill. He had a strength inside of his spirit, a courageous meekness that empowered him to play the game.
And I tell him what is going on with me, and he's like, oh, okay. And I'm like, no, I think this is like some sort of miracle, dude. And he's like, oh, of course, but I'll believe it when I see it. Honey, you've been trying to quit, and you've been saying this and saying that. And I'm his big line to me is, you shouldn't say things because I never follow through on them. And so this was week after week, month after month. He is looking at me like, this is a miracle. There is no way that you, on your own, could have done this.
In 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 16 through 21, St. Paul compares the sacrifice of the Christians to the sacrifice of Israel and then to the sacrifice of the pagans. Paul calls the chalice the blood of Christ, and the bread as participation in the body of Christ, and then warns his listeners that you cannot partake of the table of the Lord and the table of demons at the same time. So in other words, you need to decide, what are you going to participate in? Are you going to participate in the historic Christian idea of the altar of sacrifice, which is in the Eucharist, or not?
Hi, welcome back here to Journeys in Faith with Ann DeSantis here. It is so good to be here on Fiat Ministry Network. And I give a shout out to the producer, Ken Kohoski, and also Jennifer Sinclair, who's also doing great work to help promote Fiat Ministry Network. We are also a part of Patchwork Heart Ministry, which Tony, my guest here, I know you know Bill Snyder very well, and thank him for his great work too. So Tony, Agnesi, again, thank you so much for joining me on this evening.
It's just wonderful to be here. Anytime I can share some time with you is fantastic. We've had some marvelous conversations over our times together, and I really enjoy it. It's a lot of fun.
Thank you, Tony. Now, before the break, we talked a lot about your writing and about your books, and also about some of your wonderful experiences with some of the people that you've met over the years and stories. It's just awesome. Now, I know you've also done some work with the homeless and have some words to share with us there.
Yeah, I'll share a few stories with you. You know, working with the homeless is something that came about a number of years ago. You know, I am involved with country radio, and so I spent a lot of time in Nashville. And I have a favorite Mother Teresa quote, Saint Mother Teresa now, and Saint Mother Teresa said, and this is not one of her more famous quotes. She said, "Minister to the Jesus in front of you." And what she meant by that was everybody that we talked to, every person, homeless person she picked up in the streets and brought to her for medicine or to the orphanage or whatever, she was ministering to the Jesus in front of her. She used to say, you could see the face of Jesus in everyone you meet. See the face of Jesus in everyone you meet. Well, a number of years ago, I was in Nashville for a convention and staying at a fabulous hotel. The only bad news was it was $14.95 a day for internet access, and I wasn't about to pay that when right down the street was a Panera. So about 7 o'clock in the morning, I leave the hotel and begin walking to the Panera carrying my laptop, and I'm the only person on the street except for a woman who I automatically knew was a homeless woman who was across the street from me. And as I began walking, she said, "Sir, sir." And I ignored her. I just kept walking with my eyes fixed on the Panera a couple of blocks away. And then she said it again, "Sir, sir." And again, I ignored her and kept walking. And then a third time, she was standing right next to me, "Sir, sir." And I turned and I said, "Yes." And she said, "What time is it?" And I said, "It's 7 a.m. And that's when she began her story, as many homeless people do. She said, "You know, I'm from Bristol, where the racetrack is. And I've been in Nashville for 6 months, and there are no jobs. I can't find a job. And I haven't eaten in a couple of days." And I had worked with homeless people. I had done things with various homeless organizations. But I kept walking, and I asked her some questions and so forth. And when we got to the Panera, I reached into my pocket and I handed her a $20 bill, and I went right into the Panera. And as I'm standing there looking out the window at her, Mother Teresa's words rang through my head. Minister to the Jesus in front of you. See the face of Jesus in everyone you meet. And yeah, I had given her $20, but that's not what she needed most. What she needed most was my attention, for me to look her in the eyes, for me to ask her name, for me to minister to her, minister to the Jesus that God had put in front of me that day. And to be able to see the face of Jesus, you have to look them in the eye. And I didn't do that. And it was on that day I made a vow, Ann, never to ignore a homeless person again. And since that time, I haven't. Now, I'm not saying that every time I see a homeless person on the sidewalk that I reach into my pocket and give them money, but if I'm engaging, I'm going to ask them their name. I'm going to find out if they're well. I'm going to find out if they've eaten and so forth. And these are small things we can do, but you know, as we do that, as we minister to people, it gives us a chance to see our ministry in action. You know, back to my church that I go to at 12:10 some days, and one particular day, I walked in. Now, this church seats about 1,000 people. I should make that clear. It's a big church, cathedral-like church, and but I have my seat there. And you know, most people have their seat at Mass, and admit it, you have your seat, all you people watching.
Yes, yes.
And this particular day, there was a woman sitting in my seat, not my row, my seat. She was in my actual seat. And I grabbed my hymnal and I got into the row near her. I couldn't believe she was in my seat, 1,000 seats to choose from, and she picked my seat. And so as Mass began, she didn't have a hymnal, so I reluctantly shared mine with her, and she kind of mumbled her way through the opening hymn. And I could tell right away she wasn't a Catholic, and this was probably a first-time experience for her. And I went off to communion and came back and so forth. And when the Mass was over, she stopped me and said, "Sir, can I share something with you?" And I said, "Of course." And she said, "I have a $50 fine to pay at the courthouse." The courthouse is located just about next door, across the road. And I didn't have $50. All I had was a bus pass to get downtown. And I took the bus down to the bus station. And as I walked from the bus station to go to the courthouse, I passed this church. And I had never been in a church before. And I decided I was going to go in and I was going to find some way to pray for a miracle. And so she came into the church and she said, "Do you see that elderly woman sitting down in the front row?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "She saw me sitting here crying and she came over to me and asked me what was wrong. And I told her that I had a $50 fine to pay and didn't have the money." And the elderly woman reached into her purse and wrote a check out for $50. And she proudly showed me the check. She held it up for me. And that elderly woman's name on the check began with the word judge. And so she got her miracle.
Wow.
And I said, "You got a miracle. That's wonderful." And as I began to leave again, she said, "Can I stop you?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "I haven't eaten in 2 days. Can you help me?" And it was one of the, you ever have those one of those days where you just don't have any money on you? I mean, this was one of those days.
Yes.
But I had a credit card, and the university has a little cafe, a little lunch thing right down the road from the church. I said, "Walk with me." And so we walked down to this little cafe, and they had a ATM machine there, and I was able to get her some money and get her a sandwich and so forth that she could eat. And as we walked back up the hill, she gave me the biggest hug, Ann, and she said, "I walked into church today for the first time praying for a miracle." And she said, "I got 2 miracles. And she thanked
Wonderful.
me, and we turned, and she crossed the road to go to the courthouse, and I walked back up the hill to go back to my car. You see, that little gesture that judge did prompted me, and I was able to help her in just some small way. But I've seen her at Mass since then, and I heard, because I haven't been at that particular church in a while because of COVID, I go to the one close to the house here, that she is in RCIA, and isn't that neat? So you see how things work, and I could have very easily gone and sat somewhere else. I could have easily ignored her. I could have easily not shared my hymnal with her or engaged her in conversation, but I did. And so that's sometimes those things happen for a reason. And yeah, I'm one of those, Albert Einstein said, you can believe nothing is a miracle or everything is a miracle. And I choose to believe that that everything is a miracle.
Yes, I know you do. I just love your stories. And I encourage people to go to your website. We didn't mention that yet, but you have a very good website that will lead you to Tony's writing and some of the other wonderful things that he's doing. It's TonyAgnesi.com. So please do go there. And I know you're also on all the social media platforms.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
I do a couple of things. First of all, the Storytellers program is on Fiat Ministry Network. As a matter of fact, it airs Wednesday nights at 6 p.m. Got some marvelous guests lined up, and we're into that season. And so you can go to Fiat Ministry Network on YouTube, or you can go to Patchwork Heart Ministries, or you can go to my YouTube page, youtube.com/Tony Agnesi, and you can get the latest and all of the previous storytellers. And we also have the Storytellers radio broadcast up there. We've had 2 seasons done. We're in our 3rd season with radio. A new project I'm working on is a video series called 5 Minutes with Tony. We've got 24 of them posted right now. They're all 5 minutes or less videos. And we're doing 2 a week. Every Monday and Thursday we post a new one. And I've kind of made a commitment to doing 2 a week through the rest of this year, and then we're going to see how that works out in the future. They're all there. They're all just nice, short 5-minute features, and they're at my YouTube page, youtube.com/Tony Agnesi. I'm on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram at Tony Agnesi. Everywhere you might find it. I do a feature on Instagram and Facebook called Daily Grace. It's just a daily quote that I post every day, and we get comments on them, and we get people that like them. Sometimes people dislike them, but we put a different quote up every day. Many of which come from my books, some of which are anonymous quotes that some came from grandma. They come from all sorts of sources. And our goal, my goal is to have 365 of those, and we're going to get them done into one of those 4x4 cube calendars where a page a day with a different quote each day. And we were hoping to have that for 2021, but I think because of COVID, we're going to probably, push that back to 2022 and maybe get some better ones to replace some of them that aren't quite as powerful as some that we post. So all of those things are at TonyAgnesi.com. At least that'll give you a chance to get. And my store is there too. You can click on TonyAgnesi.com/store. It'll take you to my books. There's a bundle there of all 3 books. You click on it and put in the promo code FRIENDS, and you'll get all 3 books, free shipping, signed by me for $20, which is the best deal we've ever had in terms of the internet.
It sure is.
You mentioned jail ministry as well, and with COVID, we've been unable to go into the jail. We can't go in. For obvious reasons. They don't want anybody to bring anything in, nor do they want anybody there to give it to someone. So we have not been in the jail since middle of March, end of March, somewhere in that time frame. So, and I miss it. I miss spending time. When I'm in the jail, I tell the inmates I'm with that there's no place I'd much rather be than with them, because I think there's just so much to gain, as I shared the letter with you earlier in the program, that of working with people and of learning. I spend I work with both women and men, and I can share a couple of stories with you. There was a woman I met in jail, and her nickname was Buffy, and Buffy was a heroin addict. And when I first met her, she had just been arrested on a heroin charge. She looked awful, just hair disheveled, complexion, eyes were kind of muddied, and just you could see there was some beauty underneath there, but not that night. And for some reason, Buffy and I just hit it off, and we had a chance to talk on Tuesdays, and every time I saw her, she looked a little better. She cleaned up. She at least combed her hair as much as you can do when you're in jail. And she was, her eyes had cleared, and obviously, the addiction was something that she was a day at a time away from. Being away from heroin. And she was in about, I think, just under 8.5 months or something like that. And she was clean, had not used drugs for that period of time. And the last time I saw her in the jail, she said, "Tony, I'm going to get out in a week, and I have really nowhere to go." The only people I know are drug users. I have no family here. I have no clean friends that I can go to. They made a very strong attempt to get her into a halfway house, and you know, the interesting thing about heroin addictions, there's very few beds for women. Most of them are for men, and in this particular instance, there were only 6 beds in the entire county for women, and obviously they fill up quickly. And now that same county has 11, so they're getting better. But there are many more beds for men. Of course, the need is greater, but there's a need for women. And so we talked with the people at the jail about trying to get her into, and they work very hard to try to get her maybe in another county, in another facility. But at that particular time, the heroin situation was terrible. And I mean, there were just so many people. And so we said our goodbyes that particular night. And a few days later, a week later, or 2 weeks later, we had a jail ministry meeting at Panera, by the way, because they have free internet access. And we one of the gals that runs the jail ministry, my friend Connie, said to me, "Tony, did you hear about Buffy?" And I said, "No." I said, "I talked to her a couple of weeks ago." And she said, "Well, she got out on Thursday and she died of an overdose on Sunday." And I felt like a failure, Ann. I felt like I had failed her over the time I had been with her. I felt that the courts had failed her, that the system had failed her, that certainly the ability to rehabilitate from it had failed her. Here was a woman in her mid-30s who had so much life ahead of her, who had cleaned up. But then she went right back to where she was, and she resisted on Thursday and resisted on Friday and resisted on Saturday. But then it finally gave in. And the amount of heroin she was using when she was arrested was an amount that she had built up to, and using that same amount was an amount to kill her at that time, which it did. So, you know, we have these stories, and, you know, a lot since then has happened. So I want to say that we've done a pretty good job of rehabilitation facilities. The courts have recognized that many of the people who have heroin addictions have them as a result of painkillers. More people get hooked on heroin as a result of prescription drugs than through any other source. You know, they get scripted up for Oxycontin or something because they hurt their back in an accident, or an industrial thing or whatever. And when that prescription runs out, they can't get it, and heroin is the alternative, and they end up becoming heroin addicts. And there, but for the grace of God go all of us, and I can't judge these people. I can only love them and hope that we can change things to make it easier for them to rehabilitate and get back into society clean.
Thank you so much. I remember the story of Buffy. I could never forget. I know it's in one of your books. So
it is.
Always lift up those prayers for the people who have gone before us, suffered so much. And I know you, Tony, tried so hard to make that outreach. So I'm also sorry to you and your friends for that loss.
Mm-hmm.
And yes.
There's been some great stories too, like the young man who's going to be getting out, and his goal in life is to go into ministry. He wants to go into ministry. He wants to be involved in jail ministry and so forth. And hopefully we can help him make that happen by just encouraging him and keeping in touch with him. You know, I talk about some of the women in jail. You know, when I was younger, I don't know if you remember this because you're so much younger than I am, man, but guys had I had a little black book. You know what a little black book is?
Yes.
That's where you wrote down the names of all the girls you had dated, and you put whether they were a 9 or a 10 or whatever. And then in the last column, I put whether they were a good girl or a bad girl, because I dated both, you know. But now my little black book are women that I'm praying for in prison, and I have their name, and I have the number of years or months and so forth that they're serving, and they're all good girls. They're all good, and it's a chance for me to pray for them. And as I work with people in the jail and they get ready to be shipped out and go to prison, oftentimes the last night I see them, they'll hand me a crumpled sheet of paper with their name and their prison and the years they're serving. And I always tell them I will pray for them. And I do that every single day.
I know you do. You are such a man of faith. I thank you for the wonderful work that you're doing, and do invite people to please do connect with you at your website at TonyAgnesi.com, and make sure that you watch him here right on this very network, here on Fiat Ministry Network on Wednesdays, right?
Wednesday nights at
Wednesdays.
6, we premiere a new version of The Storytellers, and they're fun. A lot of the people we interview are telling their life story, their faith journey, and many of them are authors or speakers and have different ministries that they're involved with. So it's a chance to expose people to a number of wonderful, wonderful apostolates.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I really do enjoy that. Thank you for your work there, Tony. Now we're going to be wrapping up in just a few minutes here. I wondered if you had any closing words before we end.
I just want to encourage people to, when we look at the world we live in today, that that they take their faith seriously, that they, that they have a prayer life, that they are in touch with our Lord, and that they're open to the graces that can come to them by serving others. There was a note at the local St. Vincent de Paul. They needed a couple of volunteers to help at their food pantry on a Thursday night. And my wife and I went, and we absolutely worked our butts off and we never felt as good when we were done. We actually left and came back home, and it was a good feeling to know that we had helped some people. We've been blessed in our lives, and isn't it a great opportunity for us to help others by doing just small things, helping a neighbor, an elderly neighbor who might need can't go to the grocery store. Maybe you pick them up some groceries. Just be open to that. Pray that little prayer, Lord, make me an instrument, put somebody in my life today that you can help through me. I'm going to tell you, pray that prayer, my friends, and then just watch what happens. You'll be amazed.
Amen. I know you're right about that. So thanks for reminding me too, because I think we all need to hear that. Keep your eyes and ears open for how God is speaking to us.
Amen.
So thank you, Tony. Thanks for being a guest. Please come back again.
This has been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Now, one more thing. After this show is over, please do check out on patreon.com/Patchwork Heart Ministry. There will be a show called 5 Minutes of Faith. And Tony will join me as he's going to talk during those 5 minutes about dealing with changes. So make sure that you go to that site. You'll be able to get it. Now, it is a subscription, the Patreon series, and it's very well worth it. So you can learn more at the site. So everyone, you have a great night, and I'll see you next Friday night. God bless.
Journeys of Faith is a production of Fiat Ministry Network and Patchwork Heart Ministry. For more information about Journeys of Faith, email info@fiatministrynetwork.tv. And be sure to friend, follow, and like us on social media. Just search Journeys in Faith with Ann DeSantis.